You are beginning to question everything not out of rebellion, but because something ancient within you has stirred from its long slumber. It is not confusion that drives this awakening. It is remembrance. You are not collapsing, you are unfolding. What appears as disintegration is in truth initiation. The moment you ask, "Am I on the right path?" you already stand upon it, because the one who is truly lost never asks where they are. They remain dreamers in a collective sleep, walking through life with their eyes open and their souls sealed shut. What you feel right now, the tremor of uncertainty, the crack in your certainty, is not your undoing. It is your first breath of freedom. Something vast and invisible within you has begun to stir like a seed pushing against the soil that once confined it. Doubt, my friend, is not your enemy. It is your compass, your North Star shining dimly through the fog. For years, your life may have been a repetition of gestures Wake perform. Please repeat. You wore the mask well. You spoke in the language of expectations, achieving what others deemed admirable until one quiet day a fissure appeared in the perfection. You paused, perhaps mid-sentence or mid-task, and an unfamiliar whisper rippled through the static. Is this it? Is this all there is? That question is the sound of your soul tapping on the walls of your carefully built prison. It does not mean something is broken. It means something is finally alive. Doubt arises not from weakness, but from strength, the strength to see through illusions. You are not losing direction. You are shedding false maps. The self you presented to the world, the polished, practical version, was a costume tailored for belonging. But belonging built on self-abandonment is not love. It is exile in disguise. Jung once said that the soul suffers most when it has not yet discovered its meaning. This suffering you feel is not random. It is your psyche demanding authenticity. You might look around now and see others moving confidently, their paths seemingly straight, their convictions unshakable. You envy their certainty perhaps, yet a deeper part of you knows they are still asleep within the comfort of their unquestioned stories. You doubt because you have awakened, and awakening before it grants peace brings disorientation. Every birth begins with pain. There may be moments in the night when the questioning becomes unbearable, when you wonder if you're losing your mind. You sense things others ignore, subtle tensions in a room, unspoken words thickening the air, the fragile moods of strangers. You see patterns in the chaos and feel energies others dismiss as imagination. And it frightens you because you are crossing the boundary of the ordinary world. But you are not losing touch with reality, you are expanding it. The crazy ones are not those who awaken, they are those who refuse to. To awaken is to step beyond the veil to see how reality shimmers with unseen meaning. You are not unwell, you are perhaps for the first time vividly alive. And then comes that haunting question that crawls into your quietest hour. What if I'm wasting my life? What if this path of uncertainty leads nowhere? But this question too is sacred. It signals that you are no longer content to drift. The question itself is the birth of direction. It means you are taking ownership of your existence. Jung wrote that the purpose of life is not happiness, that fleeting comfort of the ego, but wholeness. Wholeness is not built by chasing light, but by integrating shadow. It begins precisely here with doubt. With the courage to ask, is this truly me, or am I just the echo of what others wanted me to be? The signs that follow on this journey are not material rewards. They cannot be measured in money or milestones. They are inner tectonic shifts, the subtle rearranging of your soul's landscape. And if you listen carefully, you will feel them. The first sign arrives disguised as an ending, a crisis, a fracture in your known reality. It might be a heartbreak that shatters your illusions, a loss that strips away what you thought you couldn't live without, a sickness that halts your momentum, or a career that crumbles despite your best efforts. In that moment you may think, this is it. I'm finished. But you are not finished. You are being transformed. What feels like annihilation is the beginning of your metamorphosis. The fire that consumes the old is the same fire that forges the new. Crisis in Jung's language is the psyche's way of demanding growth. It is not punishment. It is correction. It halts your autopilot and forces your gaze inward. It tears down the scaffolding of false certainty so that your authentic structure can emerge. What collapses in you was never meant to endure. The house that burns was built on borrowed blueprints. You begin to notice that your response to difficulty has changed. Where once you sought distraction or quick escape, now you endure. You stay with the tension. You feel the flames not because you enjoy suffering, but because you sense something sacred is happening beneath the pain, something being tempered made strong. The soul, like iron, is forged in the heat of adversity. Each time you survive a collapse, a little more of your false self is burned away. The expectations you inherited, the fears you absorbed, the masks you crafted. What remains is something raw and indestructible. The ancient alchemists spoke of nigredo, the blackening phase of transformation where the old self dies. Jung borrowed their metaphor to describe the soul's dark night. You are walking through your own nigredo. When you no longer flinch from the darkness, you begin to sense a quiet presence behind the turmoil, a watcher within you that is untouched by the flames. This is the self, the inner nucleus of consciousness that Jung called the totality of being. Every crisis brings you closer to it. You may find yourself seeing your struggles differently now. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like initiation. You start to notice that every loss has refined you. Every heartbreak has deepened your compassion. Every failure has stripped away what was false. You begin to trust the process, even when it hurts, because you know the fire is not there to destroy you, but to reveal what cannot be burned. True transformation doesn't bypass pain. It absorbs it. It doesn't climb above darkness. It carries light into it. To be reborn is not to start over, but to emerge from what you've survived with a soul made luminous by scars. This is the first sign your crises no longer break you. They forge you. You no longer crumble at the first sign of chaos because you have learned the sacred art of remaining, of staying with what is uncomfortable until it reveals its hidden teaching. The soul grows not in sunlight but in shadow. You are no longer chasing quick repairs. You are allowing the alchemy to unfold, and with each passage through the fire, you grow heavier with truth, denser with wisdom, closer to your own golden core. You have begun the journey of individuation, the becoming of what you truly are, not what you were trained to be. After the storm of crisis, a strange calm begins to settle. Not the calm of resolution, but the hush that follows revelation. You find yourself withdrawing not from life, but from the noise that once masqueraded as life. Where you once sought constant motion and approval, you now crave stillness, silence, and the simple company of your own breath. This is not isolation, it is initiation. You are learning the language of solitude, and it feels both unfamiliar and inevitable. Once the idea of being alone filled you with unease, the empty room, the unlit evening, the unshared thought. But now the quiet draws you in like a tide. It is no longer an absence, it is a presence, a sacred stillness in which your deeper voice begins to speak. There comes a moment in every awakening when solitude stops feeling like exile and starts feeling like home. You notice the subtle shift when the world's chatter becomes intolerable, the small talk, the masks, the performance of normalcy. You used to fill your time to avoid your thoughts. Now you see how empty those distractions truly were. The second sign is here: you have begun to value solitude more than social validation. Perhaps your friends have started to notice. They call you distant, withdrawn, changed. They say you've lost your spark, that you're too serious now. Once those words would have pierced you. You would have rushed to defend yourself, to prove that you still belonged. But now their misunderstanding barely grazes you. You know they cannot see what you are tending within the quiet fire at the center of your being. Jung understood this necessary withdrawal. He called it enantiodromia, the turning of opposites. When the pendulum swings from outer achievement to inner depth. It is the psyche's way of restoring balance after too long in the world's noise. The caterpillar must leave the leaf before it can fly. You are not escaping people. You are returning to yourself. In solitude, you begin to notice the finer textures of your own psyche. The internal voices that once blended into chaos start to distinguish themselves. The wounded child seeking comfort, the critical parent echoing fear, the quiet sage who has been waiting for your attention. This is the beginning of inner dialogue, the true conversation that every soul must one day have with itself. Solitude is the crucible where the fragments of your psyche begin to reassemble. It is the forest through which you must walk alone, the ocean you must cross without sails. And though others cannot join you there, you sense that this aloneness is not punishment, but preparation. There is a profound difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the hunger for another. Aloneness is the meeting with oneself. Loneliness says, "No one is here." Aloneness whispers, "At last I am." You begin to realize that every moment of solitude is a conversation with the self. The silence that once frightened you now feels like a sanctuary. You can feel the hum of something eternal behind it, a pulse that isn't yours alone but belongs to all life. Neuroscience now confirms what mystics like Jung intuited: when the external noise quiets the brain's default mode network, awakens the circuitry of introspection and self-understanding. Your mind, deprived of distraction, begins to weave connections that were previously hidden. You are literally rewiring yourself toward depth. You start noticing your energy in new ways. After social gatherings, you feel drained, your body tense as if it's worn someone else's skin. After time alone, you feel replenished, whole, subtly luminous. You learn to guard your energy the way a gardener guards a fragile sprout from careless feet. This is not arrogance, it is discernment. You are realizing that not everyone is meant to accompany you into your next chapter. Some relationships were formed by the person you used to be, the one who needed approval, who feared being forgotten. But now you no longer seek to be seen, you seek to see clearly. In this space, the ego's hunger for attention begins to starve, and something more authentic rises to take its place. The self, that deep center of consciousness, does not shout for recognition. It radiates quietly, like a candle in an underground chamber. You may find yourself journaling, walking in nature, or sitting in long, wordless reflection. You begin to listen not to the world, but to the faint stirrings of intuition, the small voice that was once drowned out by others' expectations. This voice does not argue. It simply knows. In solitude, you learn to recognize the difference between the mind's chatter and the soul's whisper. The mind is loud, urgent, logical. The soul is quiet, timeless, and patient. It waits for you to stop performing long enough to remember who you are. There is a mythic quality to this stage. Every hero in every story must one day retreat into the wilderness, Jesus in the desert, Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, Dante lost in the dark wood. These are not just tales of saints and poets, they are maps of your own interior world. The wilderness is where the false self dissolves. The desert is where the soul remembers its thirst for meaning. And yet, even as you withdraw, something strange happens. You feel more connected to life than ever. The quiet makes you more porous. You sense the pulse of the world, the breath of trees, the ache of humanity, the rhythm of unseen forces. This solitude is not isolation, it is resonance. It is your psyche attuning itself to the symphony of existence. As Jung wrote, the individual must withdraw from the collective in order to find their true self, only to return to it transformed. You are in that middle phase, the cocoon between departure and return, the in-between where everything feels suspended yet sacred. You may feel guilt for needing this space, as though your absence from others is abandonment. But understand, this solitude is not an act of rejection. It is an act of reverence. You are giving your soul the room to breathe, to stretch, to realign itself with truth. You are not pulling away because you no longer care. You are pulling away because you care enough to stop pretending. Silence becomes your teacher now. In its still depths, you begin to hear what has always been there, the soft heartbeat of truth beneath the noise of the world. The more you listen, the more it speaks. And what it tells you is simple, ancient, and liberating. You are enough even in stillness. You are worthy even in silence. You are whole even alone. And when you finally understand this, the silence stops being a void. It becomes a cathedral. There comes a quiet moment after solitude, a strange and luminous clarity, when you realize you no longer need to be understood. It is not bitterness that brings you here, but peace. Once you fought to explain yourself, every decision, every transformation. You wanted others to see what you saw, to feel what you felt. but their eyes, still half asleep in the dream of the ordinary world, could not perceive your new light. So you stopped trying. This is the third sign, the liberation from the need to be understood. It is one of the most paradoxical freedoms. You still love others, but you no longer trade pieces of yourself for their approval. You stop performing the version of you that made them comfortable. You stop contorting your truth to fit their frame. You stand quietly in your own being, sovereign, grounded whole. At first, this detachment feels like loss. You sense the widening distance between you and those who once defined your sense of belonging. Their world still revolves around the old constellations: status, success, certainty. Yours now orbits the unseen. You are no longer driven by the desire to appear right, but by the deeper need to be real. Jung experienced this estrangement himself. His break from Freud was not just professional, it was existential. When Jung began speaking of archetypes, dreams, and the collective unconscious, he was dismissed as mystical, unscientific, even delusional. But he did not turn back. He trusted the voice within him more than the applause of his peers. Every awakened soul must face this crossroad, remain accepted by the crowd, or walk alone toward the truth. And so you walk. The misunderstanding of others becomes strangely sacred. It teaches you the beauty of privacy, the knowledge that not all truths must be shared to be real. You learn that silence can protect what is still forming within you. There is wisdom in mystery. The psyche, like a seed, germinates in darkness. When others fail to see your growth, it is not because you are invisible. It is because you are still beneath the soil, becoming something vast and unseen. At this stage, your choices begin to defy logic. You follow impulses that make no practical sense but feel profoundly right. You leave jobs, relationships, cities not out of recklessness, but reverence for the quiet compass within. The ego panics, but the soul smiles. You are no longer chasing a map. You are following an inner migration, the pull of your own becoming. To the world it looks like madness, but to you it feels like sanity for the first time. You begin to see how much of your old life was built around fear of judgment, of rejection, of failure. You lived according to others' definitions of normal. Now normal feels suffocating. You crave the wildness of authenticity, the strange freedom of standing alone. And then something unexpected begins to happen. Your body joins the conversation. The fourth sign arises: the wisdom of the body, that ancient, incorruptible messenger of the soul. Where the mind can deceive, the body cannot. You begin to notice that whenever you betray your truth, your body protests. A tightening in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a sudden fatigue that no sleep can fix. When you force a smile, you don't mean your jaw aches. When you say yes while your soul screams no, your shoulders tense, your breath shallows, your energy drains. The body is the instrument through which the unconscious speaks when words fail. Jung wrote that the psyche will somatize what it cannot express. What you repress, the body confesses. Neuroscientists now confirm this strange wisdom. Emotional dissonance activates the body's stress responses. The vagus nerve, the bridge between mind and heart, carries your unspoken truths in electrical pulses. Every lie to yourself leaves a biological trace. The body keeps the score, as one modern healer wrote. But beyond that, it keeps the truth. You start realizing that your body is not an obstacle to enlightenment. It is a doorway. It has been with you since the beginning, recording every choice, every suppression, every compromise. And now it refuses to participate in your self-betrayal. It rebels, but its rebellion is grace in disguise. Sometimes this rebellion is fierce, an illness that halts you mid-stride, a sudden panic that prevents a false step, a burnout that forces you to rest. What appears as breakdown is often intervention. The body whispers what the soul already knows: not this way, not anymore. You begin to listen, and when you do, you start noticing the subtle language of sensation. A warmth in your chest when something aligns with your essence. A heaviness when it doesn't. A constriction when you compromise, an expansion when you speak truth. The body becomes your compass, immediate, precise, and uncompromising. You realize that healing is not about returning to who you were. It is about aligning your life with who you truly are. The more you listen, the more the distance between body and psyche dissolves. The old hierarchy where the mind ruled and the body obeyed begins to crumble. You see that your body was never separate from your consciousness. It is consciousness expressed in flesh. Every cell carries your history and your potential. When you begin to live in integrity, your body softens. It stops bracing for impact. The migraines ease the tension, loosens your breath, deepens. You sense a quiet joy rising from the bones, the joy of truth lived physically. And here, something sacred happens. You begin to feel gratitude toward the very pain that once frightened you, because you see that your body, in its stubborn honesty, has always been your ally. It has been the voice of your deeper wisdom pulling you back each time you drifted too far from your path. You remember moments when your body stopped you. The sudden exhaustion before a wrong decision, the chest pain before an unspoken betrayal, the anxiety before surrendering your integrity. These were not malfunctions. They were miracles. The body is the guardian of the soul. When it aches, it is asking you to listen. When it collapses, it is demanding truth. And when you finally listen, a strange reconciliation occurs. You no longer see yourself as fragments, mind here, body there, soul elsewhere. You begin to feel your being as one continuum. The mind quiets because the body no longer needs to shout. The soul smiles because it is finally being heard. This unity, this return to wholeness is not perfection. It is honesty. It is the simple, profound act of no longer lying to yourself in thought, in word, or in posture. And as this integrity deepens, you begin to sense that something vast is awakening behind your everyday awareness, a new way of seeing. The world begins to look different. Nothing external has changed, and yet everything has. What once appeared random now gleams with hidden pattern. A leaf falls from a tree and stirs something wordless in you. A stranger's glance lingers like a message. The coincidences that pepper your days no longer seem accidental. They shimmer with quiet intelligence, as if life itself were whispering through them. This is the fifth sign you have begun to see meaning where before there was only chaos. You walk through the world not as a spectator, but as a participant in a living myth. The mundane dissolves, the ordinary becomes sacred. You begin to see how every event, even the painful ones, has conspired to shape your becoming. The traffic jam that forces you to slow down, the heartbreak that shatters your defenses, the loss that forces you to see the deeper presence you once ignored. Jung called this awakening the symbolic life, the ability to perceive the outer world as a mirror of the inner. It is the moment when consciousness becomes poetic. You no longer see only the thing itself, but the story it carries. The cracked pavement becomes a metaphor for your own broken places through which the light now enters. The ocean no longer terrifies. It teaches you about depth. A dying flower reveals the tenderness of impermanence. Your perception becomes mythic because you have entered the territory of the soul. Neuroscience describes a similar shift, a synchronization between the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Logic and intuition begin to collaborate instead of compete. Symbolic thinking arises, allowing you to sense connection beneath apparent chaos. You are not hallucinating meaning. You are perceiving what was always there once the mind quieted enough to notice. The ancients called this gnosis a direct knowing that bypasses reason. It is not belief, it is experience. You begin to feel the intelligence pulsing through all things. Every gust of wind, every face, every fleeting moment becomes part of a grand dialogue. You realize you have never been speaking only to yourself. Life has been speaking back all along. And in that realization, you soften. The bitterness that once hardened your heart begins to dissolve. You stop asking why things happen to you and begin to ask what they are revealing in you. The same storms that once frightened you now cleanse you. The same solitude that once felt heavy now feels holy. The same doubt that once tore you apart now feels like a doorway. You are seeing with new eyes, the eyes of the self, not the ego. The self does not analyze. It beholds. It recognizes patterns without effort. It accepts contradiction without fear. It sees both the shadow and the light as threads of the same tapestry. You no longer seek to eliminate darkness because you understand that light has no meaning without it. You look back on your crises and see that each one was a teacher. You see how your solitude was not absence but gestation. You see how being misunderstood protected your authenticity. You see how your body's rebellion was not betrayal, but guidance. You see now that life was never against you, it was carving you into shape. When Jung spoke of individuation, he spoke of this, the integration of all opposites within the psyche until they form a unity. The warrior and the child, the rational and the mystical, the human and the divine. You no longer reject any part of yourself. Even your flaws become sacred because they too belong to the whole. You begin to live differently. Not faster, not more efficiently, but more consciously. You pause to feel sunlight on your skin. You listen more deeply when someone speaks. You notice your breath, that quiet rhythm that has carried you through every moment unnoticed. You are present not because you are trying to be, but because there is nowhere else to go. You stop chasing meaning because meaning has found you. The world has become intimate. The veil between you and it has thinned. The tree is not just a tree, it is a symbol of endurance. The river is not just water, it is the flow of life through all beings. The stranger's smile is not random, it is the archetype of the divine trickster reminding you to laugh at your seriousness. You see myths walking around in human form. You recognize yourself in them and them in you. At times this perception overwhelms you, the beauty too vast, the suffering too deep. But you no longer turn away. You know now that feeling deeply is not a flaw. It is participation in the mystery. You begin to trust life in a way that defies logic. You stop needing guarantees. You stop demanding certainty. You begin to live by faith, not blind belief, but the quiet trust that everything has meaning even when you cannot yet see it. You no longer ask, "Am I on the right path?" You feel it in your bones, in your pulse, in the way your breath moves more freely. The path was never outside you. It was within, waiting for your attention. The doubt that once tormented you now serves as your oldest companion, reminding you to stay awake. The crises that once broke you are now your sacred scars, proof of transformation. The solitude that once frightened you has become your temple. The misunderstanding that once pained you has become your liberation. The body that once betrayed you has become your oracle. And the chaos that once disoriented you has become your teacher. This is what it means to return to the self, to live in quiet harmony with the truth of who you are. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Transformation was never about arriving somewhere. It was about remembering. Remembering that you were never separate from life, never apart from meaning, never lost from yourself. You were simply asleep within a dream of someone else's making. And now you have awakened. The freedom that follows this awakening is not loud. It does not announce itself with fireworks or proclamations. It arrives like dawn, gradual, inevitable, soft. It fills you from the inside until you realize you no longer need to chase light because you have become it. You are not at the end of the journey. You are at its true beginning. The rest of your life will unfold from this, knowing that every shadow is a guide, every doubt a doorway, every silence a conversation, and every breath a prayer of becoming. Walk gently now. The path is beneath your feet, and it has been all along.